can't just ride into the valley of death, one Tory MP said, as plans and strategies swirl around Parliament to avoid a charge of the Light Brigade disaster next Tuesday.
The government might box itself in with its own red lines. There is no reason why this Parliament has to accept to be boxed in by those same red lines.
But it's in everybody's interest, theirs and ours, to set a date by which the backstop at least falls away.
This deal is flawed and also makes us weaker. But we need to take the time to build a consensus on the way forward.
We come out here to accept the customs union and the single market.
And Oliver Letwin's Plan B imagines Labour and Tory MPs working together to sideline hardline Brexiteers.
Would it look like a government of national unity, albeit a temporary one?
I think it would look like politicians working on a cross-party basis in the interests of the country to prevent a no-deal Brexit.
There were debates in the Lords as well as the second full day of debate in the Commons, and the Scottish Parliament rejected the deal and no deal by 92 to 95.
There were no abstentions. The motion is therefore agreed.
Theresa May is still charging into battle with her Plan A on Tuesday and trying to win round her critics to her deal, and especially the backstop.
I'm continuing to listen to colleagues on that and considering the way forward.
The Prime Minister's been talking to some Brexiteers who don't like the deal, promising a Commons vote before the backstop takes effect. But the publication of the Attorney General's letter on the legal effects of the backstop isn't helping those efforts. It warns that the UK could become bogged down in protracted and repeated rounds of negotiations if it wanted to get out of the backstop. It says the backstop would endure indefinitely until it was replaced by a new trade agreement. And there could be stalemate, with the UK unable to exit lawfully.
We have seen the detail of the legal advice. We have seen the facts that the government tried to hide. Mr. Speaker, this government is giving Northern Ireland permanent membership of the single market and the customs union. The Prime Minister has been misleading the House, inadvertently or otherwise. The Prime Minister must explain.
It is not the intention of either party that the backstop should A, be used in the first place, or should B, if it is used, should be anything other than temporary.
The DUP said that strengthened their intention to vote against the deal, but it didn't mean they automatically wouldn't prop up the Conservative government.
And after Tuesday, then let us see where we go from there. Our deal with in the confidence supplies with the Conservative Party, not with Theresa May.
So you think that the confidence supply arrangement might continue on the grounds that she might not be there, she might have to fold on her agreement, any number of possibilities?
Well, any number of possibilities exist. We've seen in the last 24 hours. In 24 hours, everything could change again. Let's see what happens. Let's not make too many predictions going forward.
Amidst all this tension, voices beginning to talk openly about cross-party cooperation and a government of national unity.
Do you think this sort of arrangement would sustain, should sustain?
Well, it only needs to be sustained for long enough to carry this through the House of Commons and carry through the withdrawal bill to get to the point where we have actually left the EU and entered a new arrangement. It's a few months.
And then people return to their, presumably, shattered parties.
Well, look, politics is going to be changed by all of this. It has already been changed by all of this.
Tonight, across the road, the Chief Whip is in the Lion's Den with ERG pro-Brexit opponents of the deal. Rare ventures into enemy territory in strange times.
Well, that meeting with the Chief Whip, I understand, has allowed the Chief Whip to be treated to Jacob Rees-Mogg telling the pro-Brexit Tory rebels in the room that the DUP will end their confidence and supply arrangement with the government if the deal goes through. What a lovely evening treat for him. The legal opinion publication came out. That's also firming up opinion on that side of the argument. It was in starker language than the cleansed version the government had put out a few days earlier. Those talks with the Brexiteers that I mentioned that are trying to peel some of them off, Number 10 talking to some Brexiteers, those actually do reveal some divisions within the ERG ranks. One ERG source talked about the people who are going along to Number 10, talking to them about a possible amendment that might save the day for the government, describing them as gullible, thick egotists. So divisions in those ranks, divisions everywhere you speak, people talking about some sort of unity and consensus, but my goodness, it feels a long way away.
Gary Gibbon at the Mother of Parliaments. Now, a short time ago, I sat down with the Shadow Chancellor down in Westminster, John McDonnell, and I began by asking him if he would serve in a government of national unity, as was suggested by a Conservative MP yesterday.
We wouldn't be united. We couldn't agree on 99% of policy, to be honest. I think even the ones that we would agree upon would be fairly minor.
But you wouldn't be unique in that. Nobody can agree with anybody in their own party, let alone...
I think the Labour Party's held together pretty well throughout this process on Brexit, actually. And on virtually our economic agenda and other issues, we're absolutely united.
But there's a degree of fantasy in Labour's approach too. I mean, the idea that Europe is actually open for more negotiation, it's not.
Well, I think if I was any European watching what was happening this last week, you'd realise actually to protect their own economy, global economy in terms of its operation of the European market, we're going to have to negotiate again. To protect in their own interest, they're going to have to. They've witnessed that the Prime Minister it doesn't look like she's going to deliver on the deal that she's done with them. Therefore, another deal has to be negotiated.
Yeah, but look at your sort of fundamentals. For example, you do want a single market.
No, we want a relationship with the single market, of course we do. The key thing for us is a permanent customs union, not this customs arrangement that's proposed.
But you can't pick and choose on the single market. The single market comes with freedom of movement.
It does.
And you won't accept freedom
It does, but we think we can negotiate around that. And the reason...
Who has ever managed to do it?
Well, I think
even Norway didn't manage to do it.
Well, I think we can because the times are changing, and with Europe itself is now, there's a debate around, for example, issues of freedom of movement already within European countries. So I think there is a bit of flexibility, but they know now that Theresa May can't deliver on this deal, so therefore, well, let's see if someone else can. And we've always said we're willing to take over the reins.
You're not going to tempt them if you go in there saying, we want something that is impossible for you to deliver. Would you make it possible and deliver it?
Look, I've negotiated in Europe. What you do is you negotiate, and I've always said this, on the basis of mutual interest and mutual respect. And those negotiations in that climate haven't taken place under this government. We think we could.
You want a general election. You want to be in power. You want to renegotiate. The clock is not going to stop. There isn't time for all this. And it's very unlikely there will be a general election.
I think there's a potential for us to negotiate an effective deal which will protect jobs in the economy. But what Labour Party conference has said, quite rightfully, if we can't get the deal that protects jobs in the economy, we will vote against it. And I think the vote against Theresa May's deal, some on the Tory backbenches, the numbers that have been said I think are exaggerated, but I still think there's a majority in the House against it, so it's a dead duck. So therefore some deal has to be renegotiated, and I don't think Theresa May is capable of doing that, as she's proved over the last 18 months. And it's not just her as an individual, it's the Conservative government.
You think you can squeeze in a general election, you can do all the consultation and all the rest of it, and be fixed in time for the 29th of March?
The easiest route is if the government just moved to one side and let us get on with it. That's the easiest route. If they're not willing to do that, let's have that general election.
No, but let's be candid, and Keir Starmer, I think, has hinted that they accept this, that you could move Article 50, you could move the date and start all over again.
That's not, that's always available, that's always possible, but that's not on the agenda at the moment. What we're trying to do is say, let's get clarity, this deal is not sustainable, and I think the government knows that now.
In the most literal sense of the term, are you a unionist now?
I've always believed in a united Ireland, and I've said that on a regular basis.
No, but the use of the word unionist here is one that keeps the United Kingdom as a union.
Well, we're working on the basis of the existing constitutional settlement and respecting the Good Friday Agreement. In the Good Friday Agreement, it said the union will persist for as long as the people want it, and it'll be the people of Ireland that will determine their future. Brexit shouldn't be an issue to be used either way in that matter. We're preserving the Northern Ireland Good Friday Agreement. Fully agree with it.
John McDonnell, you are a senior, experienced politician. Tell me something that I've not been able to get anyone else to answer. Where will we be in 2 weeks' time?
I haven't got a crystal ball, but let me say this. I think Theresa May's deal will be voted down. I don't think it'll be voted down.
Will she still be Prime Minister?
Not necessarily, but if I go through the options with you, I don't think her deal will go through. I don't think it'll be an enormous vote against, as some newspapers are exaggerating. I think it'll whittle down because of tribal loyalty within the Conservative Party, as in all political parties. It'll vote down. Now, she's got a choice then. Does she go off and negotiate again? Possibly, and then come back with another deal.
Would you have confidence in her coming?
No, I don't think the European Union
So there'll be
would.
a no confidence vote?
Well, possibly. We'll determine that at the time. And the no confidence vote would only go through if it had the support of all opposition parties and some Conservatives as well. We'll have to see.
Well, you must have a sense of that.
Well, there's a feel at the moment that the Prime Minister is not capable of negotiating it, but I say it's not down to her individually, because the whole of the government has not been able to negotiate this deal. They've not been able to sustain a stable cabinet, for example, not been able to sustain even a position of the Brexit secretary for any period of time. So I don't think they're capable of doing it.
Well, as the gruelling political duel continues in Westminster, what do our European colleagues make of it? I'm joined now by our Europe editor, Matt Fry, who hopefully can shed some light. You spend a lot of time knocking about European capitals. What are people saying?
Knocking
about? Well, that's how I see it, anyway.
OK, so the people I've spoken to today in Berlin and Brussels say the following things. First of all, they are rather tired of the box set that is Brexit. They've watched seasons 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. They're not interested in watching season 6. They want clarity. They want closure. Now, this means that if Theresa May loses her vote next week and she thinks she can go back to Brussels and get more concessions, forget about it. Your stocking will be empty for Christmas on that front. So the second thing is, what happens if Parliament amends the legislation fundamentally? What happens if there's a second referendum or another general election? Well, they are as clueless about the future as John McDonnell, who we just heard. But what they do want is some sort of sense of destination. They are not prepared, or they're very unwilling, put it this way, to give us a delay if they're not clear about the destination. And what they really don't want is this idea that we will take part in the European elections next May, which are crucial because it's all about the rise of right-wing populism in Europe. We take part in those elections because we've delayed the process, and then we leave with whatever president we've left behind in the form of a revived UKIP or whatever in the European Parliament. They don't want that. They really want closure, but if for some reason we decide to stay, they're happy with that too.
Matt, thanks very much. I'm sure John McDonnell would challenge the idea that he's clueless about the future. Well, earlier I spoke to the Business Minister, Claire Perry, and I began by asking her if the full legal advice had let the cat out of the bag, given that the backstop appears to threaten the integrity of the UK.
Well, I don't think that's certainly not that's not the legal advice I saw, and I think that's quite a harsh interpretation. What it said was that there were, as with any deal, theoretical risks that could come into play if the backstop was ever triggered, which of course it is our desire and belief it will not be, and that ultimately there was a sort of a legal question as to whether this backstop could be triggered unilaterally or not.
Actually,
However,
it's much more black and white than that, though, isn't it? Because it treats Northern Ireland differently than the rest of the UK. Let me just quote to you from the document so that everybody's clear. On the customs union, it says the arrangements as a whole apply differently in Great Britain and Northern Ireland. On the single market, it says the implications of Northern Ireland remaining in the EU's single market for goods, while GB, Great Britain, is not, is that for regulatory purposes, GB is essentially treated as a third country by Northern Ireland for goods passing from GB into NI. It treats the Northern Ireland differently from the rest of the UK, it splits it off.
We already have we already have a diversion of some regulatory checks between Northern Ireland and between the UK. And there is a theoretical risk, according to that advice and according to the work done, that some of those checks could be extended. But you have to remember, Cathy, that the original place of the backstop, where the EU started the negotiations, was there would be a complete carve-out of Northern Ireland from the rest of the United Kingdom. There would be both tariff and regulatory misalignment between those parts of the UK.
You said just a few weeks ago that Theresa May's deal, quote, absolutely does not create any form of separation for Northern Ireland. I've just read you the bits of the document where there is clearly a separation. So were you sold a pup?
No, this is so I would be the first person to say that we would have wanted clearer language, and particularly around the issue of the ECJ and the sort of clarity of separation. But I think we also have to accept that with the clock ticking and with Brexit Day, 114 days to go or something like that, we have to start making some decisions on this. It's been a negotiation. We have a deal that delivers on the referendum result. We have a deal, by the way, that I believe the majority of my constituents, and I had a Leave voting constituency, support. And the time for the kind of theoretical legalistic arguments which have gone on for decades in the House of Commons has got to come to an end. And the time for us to accept that this is the deal, or we have a high probability of no deal, or indeed, as you can see from some of the conversations that are happening in the House of Commons already, I know you're covering the debate, a strong probability that we will actually, the House of Commons will take control and will ensure there's no Brexit. So that's the deal. There isn't a plan B, and it is my view we have to get behind the PM and support it.
If you're insistent that the deal with Theresa May's deal is not dead, is your deal with the DUP dead?
Well, the DUP have entered into this confidence to supply arrangement. We've worked closely with them on a number of issues.
And they're voting against you on the budget. They voted against you yesterday on contempt of Parliament.
Awful lot of conversations happening, and I was really sorry to see that vote yesterday. I think that was a vote to hang a noose around the neck of future governments, and it was a shame that people were expressing political dissatisfaction with something so important.
Is
so no,
the deal
it's not
with the
dead.
DUP dead? It's not dead.
It's not
right.
dead.
It's on life support. Final yes or no answer. Would you serve in a government of national unity, as some of your colleagues are calling for? Yes or no?
I would serve in a government that delivers on this referendum result and protects the economic growth that we have developed. We have, taken the country from a terrible place economically to a place where jobs are growing, the economy is growing, the industrial strategy, 1 year on is investing in areas and sectors. I just really want to get on with the deal and serve my constituents and basically serve the national interest, which is what I was sent here to do, as were all other colleagues.
And if serving the national interest means serving in a government of national unity, that's a yes from you, is it?
Let's not even speculate about that government. We're a very, very long way from that. But we are here to serve our constituents, and we should be listening and talking to our constituents about this deal and seeing what they want.
Claire Perry, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy.
Business Minister Claire Perry there, refusing to deny that she would be prepared to serve in a government of national unity. Well, I'm joined now by Helia Ebrahimi, our economics correspondent. And we've had some bad news on the UK economy today, haven't we?
Yeah, I'm afraid the Brexit box set at home isn't much better, because we had the lowest level of factory orders since 2013, save for right after the referendum. And we've really hit a tipping point, because the blame was placed firmly by companies on Brexit uncertainty. No longer fear of what might happen, it's happening to them now. And economists use this data set to gauge future economic growth. And judging by today's message, it's quite worrying. Take, for example, the service sector, the engine of the UK. Well, growth there is basically grinding to a halt. And one analyst even warned that we could go into reverse by the end of this year.
Well, whether it's a box set or a data set, it doesn't bode particularly well for the government selling its deal, does it?
Yeah, just as the Prime Minister was in the House of Commons defending her deal, her number two, Philip Hammond, was just across the road giving evidence to the Treasury Select Committee. And he was asked point blank, how can you defend the Prime Minister's deal when your own department has admitted that any kind of Brexit would make the country poorer? And, Kathy, I mean, Spreadsheet Phil isn't one for being emotional, but he did get a little bit, not Churchillian, but less stiff than he usually is. And his message was that to kind of betray the Brexit voters would cause huge damage to British society, and damage that's a lot more fundamental than just shaving a few points, percentage points of growth off the UK economy. Now, for a lot of working families or companies that are reliant on trade, that kind of calculation may seem strange.
Helia, thanks very much. John.
Well, now, the status of Gibraltar proved to be a sticking point in the lead-up to the Brexit deal agreed on by Theresa May and the EU after Spain appeared to back down from its last-minute threat to veto the agreement. I'm joined now by the Chief Minister of Gibraltar, Fabian Picardo. Chief Minister, what's your reading of what's happened?
Well, I think we're in a situation where there is only really one option at the moment in front of the House of Commons. We have to appreciate that. This is the deal that the House of Commons has to consider, and they have to take a vote on it. And therefore, for Gibraltar...
Well, they're not going to support it, are they?
Well, for Gibraltar, it was important that by the time this got to the House of Commons, we should have carved out for us a safety net to ensure that if there was a transitional period for the United Kingdom, there should also be a transitional period for Gibraltar. And that's what we've done. We've worked very closely together with the current administration, and we've been able to ensure that Gibraltar fits in well with this deal. And this is a deal that works for Gibraltar.
OK, well, you've been telling MPs that today.
I have.
And you've had the advantage of seeing more of them than I have. What did it feel like? I mean, do they seem, oh, wonderful, yes, let's go for this deal?
Well, no, I think there are some who are very supportive of the fact that this deal delivers Brexit, something which I didn't choose and wouldn't choose if there was an opportunity to rescind the Article 50 notification, as there now appears potentially to be. There are others who voted to remain, who think that this is at least a way of delivering on the referendum result. And then, of course, there is a rump of people who think that this does not deliver on the referendum result, or they didn't choose Brexit and they don't want to see it through. But this is the only option today before the House of Commons, and Mrs May has brought a deal back which does put us down gently. And I think that is the one thing that this deal has going for it. It avoids a cliff-edge Brexit.
But moving around the precincts of Westminster, you cannot be unaware that politics in that place is imploding.
Well,
and that
febrile.
has terrible implications, and not least for you.
It is febrile. I've not seen a situation like this in the time that I've been actively following British politics since I was a teenager. And we see history being made every day, which is something quite remarkable on its own. But despite that, Theresa May has been written off almost every day since she took over as Prime Minister in the most difficult circumstances 2.5 odd years ago. People thought she wouldn't bring back a deal. People thought she wouldn't survive. She survived, and she's brought back a deal and managed to carve out a place for Gibraltar in that deal, and that's why I'm backing this deal.
One thing then, what is the bottom line that you do not want damaged?
Well, Gibraltar's economy, of course, is essential. I mean, the sovereignty of Gibraltar is not in play at all, and therefore I don't need to go there. But for Gibraltar to continue to be a vibrant economy, we need to have access to the United Kingdom market. We've been able to assure that in the context of our bilateral discussions with the United Kingdom, and this also gives us access to the EU single market for as long as the UK has that access through the withdrawal process also.
And then that goes.
And then potentially that goes. That's why if you ask any Gibraltarian what their preferred option is, and I'll speak for all of them as their elected representative, we'd rather remain in the European Union.